what is it like being an Uber driver and a Lyft driver in Denver, Colorado? I was just there for a month. In case you're curious, I have a link listed below in the description to all these videos I did about Colorado and especially Denver. Now, what is it like being a driver? Let's be honest, you want to know, how much money can you make? I feel like that's the number one question when it comes to people considering being a driver or not. I actually got two very different values for one unique reason that I'll get into. The first value I got was people said about $25 an hour. That was the average amount I got from a lot of Uber and Lyft drivers, was about $25-ish an hour. However, on the other end, drivers tell me they made on average about $40-ish an hour. That's a pretty big difference. $25 an hour versus $40 an hour, that's a $15 an hour difference. Where does that come from? Turns out when I talked to a lot of the drivers who made about $40-ish an hour, some of them even said, yeah, sometimes between 40 and even 50, if I do it right, is the bonuses. Every single driver I talked to who made that amount of money stressed the bonuses. I always like asking when I travel, like, hey, what is it like to drive in this area? And when talking to them and saying, yeah, I'm just curious, kind of the hourly rate, they're like, well, here's the thing. In Denver, $25 an hour is gonna be your average, quote unquote. However, in Denver, the bonuses are off the charts. If you time the bonuses well, if you look at the fine print of the bonuses and you figure out a good strategy, then you can easily make, on average, about $40-ish an hour. And that's what I thought was very interesting. Now, as we all know, Uber bonuses, Lyft bonuses, super common. It does vary and change city to city, but this is something to keep in mind. From what it seemed like to me, Denver had one of the most unique and one of the best bonus structures out of any city I've ever been to. A lot of the drivers were telling me their strategies and their own kind of unique tricks to basically be like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and this, because they have this one unique bonus structure, but if I time it out well and do this amount of rides and overlap it, there's a lot of strategies that I heard in Denver, which is pretty cool. I feel like every city has its own unique strategies and ways to make more money driving, but when it came to Denver specifically, every single driver was like, look, when it comes to these strategies, it's not about when you drive per se. Of course, morning and evening commutes, Friday and Saturday nights, etc., but it's how you drive. It's how you drive and time out the bonuses so you can make the most amount of money. And this is why my number one pro tip, I did a video about this, my number one pro tip to make the most amount of money when driving for Lyft and Uber is analytics. Look at when you're making the most amount of money, when you're not making the most amount of money, and calculate from there. Because like I said, every city has its own quirks and little things, and especially in Denver, time and time again, when talking to and interviewing different drivers, the number one word I heard was bonuses. Way more than any other city I've ever been to. Bonuses, bonuses, bonuses. Now, what's interesting about Denver as well, that's very unique compared to other cities, is it's a normal sized city in terms of the main hub. You're gonna be doing the normal rides in terms of the neighborhoods, bringing people to bars, to different areas, so on and so forth. One thing I will say, I have to say it, I've never driven in any other city that had that many traffic lights. Just to keep that in mind, if you're planning on driving in Denver, if you've not lived there yet or driven there yet, I don't know why, but the amount of traffic lights there, off the charts. The point where it was so frustrating where I'm like, look, I'd rather be stuck in LA traffic than have to go like an eighth of a mile, stoplight. Another eighth of a mile, stoplight. A 16th of a mile, stoplight. I don't know why there's so many stoplights in Denver. There's got to be some reason behind it. But anyway, another big thing though to keep in mind is when it comes to Denver, in case you didn't know, the airport is very far from the city. So I talked to a lot of drivers who said they tried to almost avoid airport rides as much as possible. Here in LA, I feel like it's the opposite. For a lot of drivers, you're like, hey, I want to do airport rides because they spike up the rates, the surges, everything. And LAX is very well located when it comes to LA. When it comes to Denver, that airport is miles away from the heart of the city. So if you do get an airport ride, what I heard from a lot of drivers, as opposed to most cities where you're like, oh, I got an airport ride, I'm gonna make a good amount of money. In Denver, it's the opposite. So a huge pro tip I heard from a lot of drivers actually is using Lyft. You can do destination mode. What that means, you say, hey, I want my ride drop-off point to be in like this given area, for example. And on Lyft, depending on your driving status, you can do like say like a couple times a day, and more depending on your status and everything. What I heard is a huge pro tip from drivers is have your destination mode not where you live, which is where a lot of drivers put it, but just the general area of Denver. By doing so, you're avoiding all of the airport rides. So if you're planning on driving in Denver, keep that in mind. From what I heard from a lot of drivers, the airport rides are the most hated because they bring you all the way out to the airport. Then the only way you can come back in is, of course, getting a ride coming back in, and the money is just not worth it. The time, the effort, just not worth it when it comes to airport rides, specifically for Denver. So if you are planning on driving, look at Lyft and see if you can do your destination mode in the heart of the city. That way you can avoid the airport as much as possible. However though, when it comes to Denver, when it comes to making the most amount of money, and let's be honest, I feel like for these videos where I talk about like, oh, what is it like to drive in a given area? Money is the number one thing. Let's be honest. You want to make money, and of course, you want to make the most amount of money. The bonuses in Denver, from what I've heard, like I said numerous times in this video, are the best by far for probably any city I've ever heard of when talking to other drivers. And if you do it right by keeping track of the bonus structures and developing your own strategies, it seems like when it comes to Denver, the bonuses can make you about a consistent $40-ish an hour.